Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Saturday, October 1st, 2016. And I'm going to go ahead and say it, guys, the month for virtual reality. Probably the single most exciting month that I've personally been looking forward to since the months of the Vive and Rift launching. There's so much going down in this month, and I can't wait to share it with you guys, whether it's through news, product demonstrations, games, whatever. It's going to be a hell of an awesome month. We've got the Oculus Connect conference. We have, like I said, PlayStation VR on the 13th. We have, I strongly believe, the Touch in the second half, the latter half of October, and a crap ton of virtual reality games, albeit most for Sony, is all going to contribute to the fact that it's going to be a hell of a good month. Now, moving into some product news, or updates rather, I talked in the past about the Dexmo glove, and this is the one that had the really cool haptic feedback to stop your fingers, at the dimensions of the virtual object, to make it feel, to get that tactile haptic response of grabbing objects, right? So it had all kinds of cool functionality. Well, me and the rest of the gamers that were excited about it, we weren't the only ones that were excited. It turns out that surgical or surgery boards and committees representing surgeons are really excited about this device. They see it as offering all kinds of potential for practicing new experimental surgical techniques, refining existing ones, cross-training, all kinds of cool things they see as being possible with this. And I got to agree, we're going to talk about it specifically, but another example, yet again, of VR outside of gaming, right? So very, very cool. And it also came to light, which I didn't know, and I'm probably butchering your name, Aller, Aller Gu, G-U. Young guy, really young, who was behind the Dexmo glove. And that's one of the things, as you get older, and it's not all of us, I'm talking about just kind of sweeping generalizations, you tend to get a bit more jaded as you get older, sometimes a little more conservative even, but also it's a lifetime of learning boundaries for things, right? The advantage of being young is a lot of times you don't know what the frickin' boundary is, and you just steamroll right through it because you didn't even consider that as a possibility. And that's the beauty of, when young people and innovation goes hand in hand, you get all kinds of cool stuff coming out of that. Again, not to say you can't be older and be innovative. Of course you can. But like I said, some of that naivety or just not knowing the boundaries, that can go a long, long ways. Next up, DriveClubVR. It's a PlayStation VR game I've talked about in the past as well. We have an official release date coinciding exactly with the PlayStation VR's release date, October 13th. We also have a price, $40 US. That will also provide a discount for the DLC first season pass. They don't specify how much or what form that is, but still cool to hear. And a few minutes ago, I talked about my hunch that the Touch, we were going to see it second half of October. Well, here's another indicator of, that has me convinced that's the case. We received word today that they formally submitted to FCC. Now, FCC is the regulatory board in the US that checks for electromagnetic safety, right? Most companies will test that all ahead of time. It becomes just a formality, generally. There's always exceptions to that rule. But most companies, with the amount of money that they sink into something, first in R&D, then ultimately in marketing and fabrication, they usually check because there's just way too much money riding on not doing that and then having to go back to the drawing board when you fail. So very cool, and again, just strengthens, for me personally, that it's going to be an October release date. Next news piece has to do with an application called NEOS. And again, very innovative young founder. His name is TOmas Mariancik, and I apologize, I'm butchering your Slavic name. Any Slavic peoples watching, my apologies. We're just going to go with Thomas. He built NEOS as being as important to VR, or that was his hope, as Google Docs. That instrumental. Now, that is a very large kind of benchmark, quality line in the sand to achieve. So good on him for being that optimistic and that aggressive in his prediction and desire. He essentially, with his team, dropped all projects that they had on the go to the wayside except NEOS. And what they've come up with in just 3 months is pretty damn remarkable. He's got an hour-long video. I think it's an hour and 4 minutes. I'm going to link it below. I cautiously would throw in that it can be dry and it's very long, very, very long, but show some really cool stuff. Specifically, what I thought was awesome was an example of photogrammetry where he literally, based on just a photo of the environment, renders pretty much in real time that environment, that office environment, in NEOS. Very cool to see that going. Also, one of the team members joined him from a couple of floors down, and you see him leaving and going there to show the collaborative potential of this, to have people, different parts of the world, being able to join in. So all in all, very cool. Take a look at that. Interested in knowing what your thoughts are. Next up, Pacific Gas and Electric, California company. Similar to kind of the surgeons, but more in their field. They are very interested in what VR can do for safety improvement, right? Safety training. Obviously, when you deal with electricity, safety is critical. It's paramount because your life could literally be on the line. So electrical companies take that very seriously. And electrical companies have what are called substations. So every, town, city generally has these, unless you're in the middle of nowhere, in a cottage by a stream, right? In which case you might use solar panel or other stuff. But the point is, the safety training is critical to not get electrocuted. So they've got one substation pretty much accurately recreated in VR. They hope to do that with all the substations so that their field service techs can train safely for all kinds of scenarios. So yet just another cool example of VR outside gaming. Now, we've talked a lot about winners in VR, and we've talked a lot about losers. And the sad reality is there's going to be way more losers. That's just, like I said, reality, right? There can only ever be one winner, or several in VR's case, but way more losers. Fool.com, kind of, playing on the gist of that, picks two objects that they believe, two products that they believe personally are overvalued. And we could use the layman's terms, kind of overhyped, but they go with overvalued, and they bring up some good arguments, for why they say that. But essentially the two are GoPro and then a company called InvenSense. InvenSense does the tracking sensors, HTC Vive side of things. And GoPro, of course, is the 360-degree products. They've got the Omni and the Odyssey rig. Their argument is kind of threefold. First, that it's not really even their core business. Second, economies of scale, and I'll get into the why of that in a second. And third, they haven't really defined, what they're for or what market they're targeting, and they just haven't had a lot of sales. That's the reality. So, digging into that a little bit deeper, their argument specifically with InvenSense is, like I said earlier, the economy of scale argument. So, Bosch and the other companies, ST Microelectronics, much larger companies. And economy of scale wise, they could outprice, outmanufacture the other guys under the table 10 ways to Tuesday, right? And that's all it would take, them to get really aggressive to kind of wipe them out. And with GoPro, it's just a lack of sales. So anyways, they bring up some good points. Have a read. And if that's of interest, let me know. Next up, 7 non-gaming applications for VR. This is a Forbes.com article, and it's one that brings up some good stuff, most of which we've already talked about here between, me and my news and you and me with comments. We've pretty much touched on all of these, but let's go through them just really quick. So the first one, field training without the field. Just talked about that today. Most recently was today with the electrician example, right? That they can practice safe techniques in VR. Next up, events and trade shows going virtual. We've talked about that in the past. Next up, information overlays and virtual object manipulation. We've talked about that as well. Again, just today, AR and VR for surgical training enhancement. Absolutely. AR and VR enhancing the state of business. And we've talked about that in the form of conferencing, right? Being able to relay tone and, more importantly, body language, both of which you can hide even on video conferencing. So yeah, very cool that. Medical education, we've covered that too. And the last one, we've kind of indirectly talked about this one, and that is simply that there's exposure therapy, right? Meaning the ability for VR to help people with phobias. Now, I'm scared of heights, literally scared to death of heights, and I've had that since I was a kid. Open heights. If you invite me over to your house, you're in a condo on the 40th floor balcony, and you say, you know what, let's have a coffee and lean over the ledge here as we talk, couldn't do it. Terrified of that kind of heights. Rock climbing, same thing. I would just shake and grind to a halt. Airplanes, no big deal. It's contained, so it's open heights. Anyways, with this, it could be anything. It could be agoraphobia. It could be, there's so much potential for VR to help people with phobias. It's astounding, right? And speaking of the heights one, I'm going to record after this somebody's plank, Roberts or Stevens plank. It's a heights thing. They recommend you use an actual piece of wood, which I have, so that'll be kind of cool. And I still get that effect. I call it the Mercenary on Targ effect. That's the first video game that me and a buddy who's also scared of heights, Exidy here, on who I have here on Fridays, we call it the Mercenary on Targ effect because that was the game that gave us that real sense of, it was a 3D game of, vertigo and nausea as you're plummeting towards the earth like a sack of potato meat, right? So I'm curious how that will work out tonight for me, but we'll get to that. And then last up, this one is a bit of a piss-off article to me. I'll be interested in knowing what your guys' thoughts are. I'm just going to lay out the facts and let me know what you think, okay? Personally, I will say this. I hate when something is decided for me. It's especially if it's something that's not harming anybody, something that could be educational. Please don't decide for me what I can see and what I can't. Keep the kids out, sure, but let the adults figure that out for themselves, right? Anyways, a group has managed to have the VR Knott's Berry Farm ride that I've talked about twice on here shut down because they feel that it hurts mentally ill people. Now, I have 2 members of my family with mental illness, both of which have tried VR, both of which today, actually less than an hour and a half ago, I talked with and asked specifically if that would offend them, and they said no. So I don't know what kind of a poll they did to determine that or where they're coming from that, but here's some facts. This is the truth. Insane asylums, right, as they were known then, were not resort towns. In most cases, they were horrible places to be. They were places where people with mental illness were essentially locked up and forgotten about. Sometimes abused physically, mentally, sexually. In short, just a horrible frickin' place to be, right? Usually just horrid. Like, words just don't do it justice. That is the reality. It was, and this is also true, it was actually, there was a point in time, late 1800s, early 1900s, men could have their wives committed. Say they're going through menopause or whatever. They could have actually back then, and it happened to women, have them committed and lobotomized. So let's not sugarcoat and base what insane asylums are now versus what they were, because they were horrible. And I haven't tried the ride, but if it is all educational in the sense that that's what it's mirroring, is the experience, because apparently you're in a wheelchair and you're being institutionalized, right? If it does accurately portray what these places were like, I don't see any harm in that. I see more value in that it's showing what we never want to go back to as a society. So let me know what you guys think. Take a look. And yeah, I'm curious. Which way do you lean on that with the VR ride? Doesn't matter where you come from. I'm interested in knowing. All right, guys, that's it for the news video. As always, cheers. Time for some gaming for me. As always, again, cheers. And definitely catch you on the VR flip side.